when the A-League season starts to hype up? I know that's sort of one of your favourite sports to cover. Is that where you get the butterflies up and you really can't wait to sink your teeth into it?
Yeah, particularly at the moment. I mean, most definitely the first 2 weeks of the season, I think have been incredible. You know, some of the goals we've seen, some of the action we've had. I mean, I tweeted it yesterday. You know, it's week two, and just look at some of the craziness we've seen in the A League. It's one of the more ridiculous leagues in the world in a good way. Like you just never know what you're going to get in terms of the goals and the action. And so yeah, when the season rolls around, I'm sort of licking my lips, not only from a work front, but as a football fan. I think it's massively underrated, the A-League, and does get a bit of a bad rap at times. And look, if you're sleeping on the A-League, you're missing out because it's just going to get better.
Do you think just from I guess, the soccer point of view, coming off the back of a very successful Women's World Cup, do you think that might have heightened the interest in the sport across Australia in general now as we transition to the A-League? And, you know, this past weekend, we've had the Women's World Cup qualifiers in WA with record crowds. Do you think that sort of interest has been heightened on the back of the World Cup?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, we saw a couple of weeks ago, a record crowd for Sydney FC. I was at that game against the Melbourne Victory to launch the season, and the Wanderers, I should say, in the women's. And yeah, incredible crowds. We've seen that across the league. The Matildas in the last couple of weeks as well. Their crowds continue to just surge on post World Cup. The TV ratings phenomenal in the World Cup, and that's continued as well. So I just think it was an eye opener to a lot of people. I mean, the hardcore football fans like myself, we were all over the Women's World Cup. Spent way too much money on tickets myself. And then the rest of Australia sort of caught on as we hoped they would. And I think people are now, understand the game a little bit more and see, the enjoyment it brings and how competitive we can be from, in terms of the Matildas on a world level. So, and the Socceroos as well, making the round of 16. So it's a great time for Australian football. And I just think, it's been some dark periods, but it seems like we're coming out of that and some real success around the corner.
And you're involved in sport across different levels and different sports across the country. Do you feel like the focus now on women's engagement in sport from grassroots levels to the top, are we starting to see that as a flow-on effect with just general interest in not only just the sporting codes, but also women's participation and women's interest growing?
Yeah, most definitely. So I've got a young niece, and she's my barometer for, I guess, the trajectory of women's sport. She's 10, started playing cricket this year. She's played all the sports. She plays AFL at the moment, plays soccer as well, knows everything, watches everything. And the fact that she's playing cricket in an all-boys team, she's seen the WBBL on TV and wants to play her part. So I think that's part of it. I think they always say, you can't be what you can't see. And I definitely think there's a tie you can draw to, these young women taking up sport more and more. And, that flows to watching it and generally being a sports fan as well. So I think, flash forward 20 years, it's remarkable. Now, seeing the crowds we're getting for the Matildas and the ratings, that's only going to flow to other sports. NRLW, AFLW, rugby sevens growing all the time. So yeah, it's going to be the next gen is going to be another story altogether.
Aside from the cricket, for me, I think the rugby sevens, the women's team, that was the barometer of women's sport, particularly at the Olympic level, when you see the top stars just dominating teams. When the Australian team comes together, what they've been able to do overseas, that is just phenomenal. And you hear the commentary over the top of that, and they're just the callers are just going, falling over their feet about just how good the standard is and bringing it to life in a way that women's sport just hasn't really been delivered over the last sort of 5-10 years and ever really.
Yeah, and I mean, in women's sport, I mean, as a fan, when you're watching it, some of them, you watch, say, the NRLW. I love watching the NRLW because I feel it's more attacking and more entertaining than the male version. And I think the same with women's football. You see a lot more attack. You don't get this caginess that you sometimes get in some of the bigger games in the men's game. So, yeah, I think as an entertainment product, they're definitely there. And there is that argument that, it's, not the same as men's. I don't buy into that. I feel like, they are different, but they're different in a positive way. As I said, NRLW, I love watching it. They hit just as hard as the men.
Yes.
And look, the Matildas showed it can captivate a nation. It's no different. So as an entertainment product, I think there's some sports that have work to do in that area. But on a whole, I think again, people are sleeping on these women's sport. They're missing out.
I'll ask a question as a broadcaster because you've observed a lot. But do you think because there's still process and development for some of these major sports where there's probably not as much focus on strategy, but there's a lot of skill development. So therefore, we do see the better players and the better execution of skills start to come to fruition, therefore making it for a more exciting thing. I look at, having, probably worked with you over the with the women's soccer in the A League W last season. It just felt there was more goals, and the better players really stood up. I think as a sporting fan, and I wonder if you feel the same as well, that you just don't know what you're going to get because there's not as much strategy, because we're seeing the talent really rise to the top, and eventually we'll see an evolution to build strategy to counteract that talent.
Yeah, well, the A-League W, for example, is in a bit of a tough spot because we've seen, particularly the last sort of 2-3 years, a lot of those Matildas players have gone overseas. They were sort of splitting their time between the US and Australia, but now generally they're in Europe, most of them in the English game, and some of them in Spain and France. And that's really seen as sort of a talent churn out of Australia. And a lot of players have sort of had to step up from the NPL level. But what has impressed me, I think the standard, obviously there's going to be a natural drop off when 70% of your sort of core international talent does leave the league. But I think on the whole, I mean, I've been blown away by just seeing that trajectory from the NPL to the A-League W. I mean, I covered the NPL here in New South Wales for about a decade, and year on year, I mean, I played youth league myself, coming through the grades, and they're a lot more skillful than I am. They're a lot more technically minded. Like people say, oh, the curriculum, has it been a waste of time? Definitely not.
No.
I think about the coaching I got. I now see the coaching that the players coming through today receive. It's not perfect, but you're making better footballers, better technically, and you mentioned the tactics and the mindset. They don't just know one way of playing. They've got multiple ways of playing, and we are making better footballers. And I think we're seeing the early signs of that in the past couple of World Cups.